Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever wanted true peace in your life, then do we have the show for you. Today I'll be talking with Jonathan Granoff, attorney, author, international advocate, senior advisor, and UN representative of the Permanent Secretariat of the World Summits of Nobel Peace Laureates. Say that 10 times fast. Ambassador for Peace, Security, and Nuclear Disarmament of the Parliament of the World Religions, and chair of the Task Force on Nuclear Non-Proliferation, and advisor to the Committee on National Security of the International Law Section of the American Bar Association. Today I want to have a deep discussion on inner and outer peace, how we can find more of it, bring it into our hearts, and change the world by diving deep and who and what we truly are. That plus we'll talk about James Goodall and chimpanzees, Michael Douglas and Bono, Johannes Venterveen, Dr. William Perry, Valerie Plame, Daniel Ellsberg, barefoot running and arms control, and what in the world split pants and bungee jumps has to do with anything. So welcome to the show, Jonathan. Are you ready to shine?
I'm ready to just be myself.
Woohoo! All right. We're going to talk real briefly about your story. Then we're going to dive into the how-to. But before we do that, why are you traveling all over the world and what's your mission?
The world is in a unique situation at this moment in history. Never before has the reach of human technology put at risk the entire gift of the human experiment.
Yeah.
And the decisions made today, as never before, will affect future generations. When the Golden Rule was articulated by Confucius, Jesus, Socrates, Mohammed, and many, many others, it was purely horizontal. Because even had somebody wanted to destroy the future, they were unable to at those times. So the admonition to treat others as one wants to be treated, or to refrain from treating others as one doesn't want to be treated, that admonition was horizontal. It related only to the people with whom one was sharing that moment of creation.
Yeah.
Today, the actions that we do could actually end future generations. So we're the first generation of human beings that has to decide intentionally whether it will or will not be the last. That's very unique. That's number one.
Yeah.
Number two, the major threats to future generations and to the very survival of our species are global in nature. An example would be 50 to 70% of our oxygen comes from phytoplankton, a single-cell organism in our oceans that depends on the pH alkaline balance of the oceans, which depends on the balance of salt water and fresh water, which depends on the climate of the planet, which seems to depend on how we heat our houses and move our bodies in metal machines. So, the very way in which you or I go to get our groceries is actually affecting future generations as never before. The health of the rainforests, the other major source of oxygen for humanity, depends on, it seems to be, largely people's eating habits. A large number of people eat lots of cows. To have those cows get big and fat enough to make hamburgers and steaks, people are burning rainforests, which is a lung for all of us. So these problems that we're facing are global in nature with respect to our very breathing. The biggest barrier to this cooperation that's needed to ensure a sustainable future are nuclear weapons. And nuclear weapons present a barrier to the cooperation needed to address these threats. So the major nations of the world are not, there's 9 nations with nuclear weapons. The major nations in the world are pursuing global security by threatening to annihilate themselves and all other human beings in the interest of preserving the state. And again, it comes back to this golden rule issue. Essentially, they're saying these weapons, over 14,000 of them,
Mhm.
are of benefit to our nation, but not benefit to the over 183 nations without them. Imagine if the Biological Weapons Convention said no country can use smallpox or polio as a weapon, but we'll let 9 countries use the plague as a weapon to ensure international peace and security. You could see patently how unstable and unethical that would be. But that's precisely the regime we have with respect to nuclear weapons. So, as president of the Global Security Institute and as a human being uh, who holds the sacred gift of life as precious and whose conscience has been touched by seeing the suffering of people in the developing world that's unnecessary, the gross poverty that exists, I feel an obligation to use the skills that I have to advocate for a more moral and legally based international order, because frankly, I feel connected. I feel connected to the obligation to my fellow human beings of today, and I guess oddly enough, to people who aren't even born yet.
I
That
don't
I think they have a right to. They have a right to what you and I have.
I don't find that odd. I was given an article earlier this week, and I haven't had time to dive deep, but it talks about how genetically maybe we are not wired to think of our progenitors, to think of our future generations, which is something that gets to shift because I mean, it is it the Iroquois, seventh generation? We have to think that way, but it gets to kind of the crux, and we're jumping the gun here of the fact that we are perhaps not just all one, but all generations are all one. It is all one. It is. In fact, let's jump back in time with you. I'm going to put you in a Wayne's World time machine here today, Jonathan. We're going back in time. When and how were you attracted? Because you have a very, we'll call it analytical or head-based education that has allowed you to take this journey. But when were you attracted to a heart-based path?
I can't ever think of. I don't know what it means, a heart-based path. I mean, human beings from the time we're born. I was a child development major
Yeah.
in college. I mean, human beings from the time we're born, we respond to love and kindness, and we are repelled by threats and shame and violence. If children are not held and loved, they don't develop. So the truth that I learned was that I was welcomed with love and by my parents from the very beginning. So I was always attracted to that. And I believe everyone is that way, in fact. I think the question is, what were the things that caused me to become conscious
Yes.
and aware that one should approach human institutions, de jure institutions, institutions created by law and by man, um, with an integration of those deeper values. That's a different question, and I do like to be accurately analytic. The the present anti-intellectualism that's being propounded by world leaders is awfully dangerous. I mean, Michael, imagine if you decided, gee, I'd love to do brain surgery, and you went into a local hospital and said, well, you gave them a donation, and said, hey, I'd really like to do some brain surgery. I
Oh
mean, what's so
God.
difficult? You just cut them open, pull the crap out, you clean them up, sew them up again. I mean, what's the big deal? Why are you making it so complicated? All these books and machines and stuff. This is pretty straightforward. And the affairs of nations, I mean, you just go over and talk to the leader and say, hey, let's just get together and get rid of these weapons and have peace amongst us. It's just not that way. The world is nuanced. And there are skills, particularly among states and corporations and institutions, that requires some level of thoughtfulness. I noticed, um, I would, okay, I'll take one issue.
Yeah.
I was interning in Washington in the 1960s. And as an intern, I had the privilege of being hosted for a small luncheon by then Senator Robert Kennedy,
Mm-hmm.
who was the senator from New York State at the time. And he was in the inner circle during the Cuban Missile Crisis when his brother was the president.
Yeah.
And he expressed to the about 6 or 7 of us interns how close we came to ending civilization. And even then he didn't know that the missiles in Cuba were fully operational, and that had we done what our military leaders were demanding of President Kennedy, invaded, they would have launched those missiles, and we would have had a full-scale nuclear exchange. What he did know is that we came very close. He didn't know how close, but he said it was only good luck. And he said that dealing with the threat of nuclear annihilation was the moral and practical litmus test of modern man. And so I was seized of that issue then. And I understood that it was not, that it was being guided not by simple logic, but by complex institutions that benefited from this venture, and a set of beliefs, a set of myths that I believed, that I understood way back then to be false. The myth that security could be obtained best by the application of force and militarism and the pursuit of domination and power. During that time, shortly after that time, I became aware of the imposition of that ideology on the people of Southeast Asia, of Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos, where we dropped enormous tonnage of weapons on these poor innocent peasants and did not obtain security. We now have security because we're reaching out as trade partners. We didn't have to kill 3 or 4 million people to do that. The belief that we could pursue with other major countries what's called strategic stability, while at the same time pursuing military advantage, kind of schizophrenic logic, and that we could do much better. So the entirety of my adult life from then has been aware of this sword over humanity's head and how important it is to change.
It's interesting. My undergrad degree, I'm watching it coming back around full circle now, was in international affairs, some constitutional law, but mainly international affairs. I had tried to build a degree in exercise phys. My school wouldn't let me do it. So I'm like, well, let's look at how we work with the world. And I took a class, and I always get the gentleman's name wrong. I'm not sure if it was Hendrickson. He was second under Rumsfeld in I forget even what his title was, Deputy Defense Director, something like that. He was second under Rumsfeld, and he taught a class that I was fortunate to take on nuclear arms control. And I learned back then the theory of MAD, which explains it all. Mutually assured destruction. If there isn't a more accurate and perverse term out there, I don't know what it is.
Oh, I do. You see, mutually assured destruction was the premise that led Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev at their first summit to say a nuclear war can never be won and therefore must never be fought because we'd be mutually destroyed. Our current president of the United States refuses to acknowledge that principle, by the way, and in fact, the current warfighting strategy contemplates using nuclear weapons as part of conventional fighting,
I have heard
which
this.
I think truly is mad. But what the scientists have now determined is that if a mere less than 1% of the arsenal, about 100 of these devices, were to go off in a nuclear exchange, say an exchange between India and Pakistan, that it would throw in excess of 5 million tons of soot into the stratosphere and end agriculture as we know it in any meaningful way to sustain humanity for at least 10 years. So even the country that initiated the nuclear exchange they would be destroyed. So I'm calling it sad, self-assured destruction, which I
Laughing,
think
but I'm not.
which more accurately describes the insanity of this totemic worship of the pursuit of absolute power. And I think that we need a major, major cultural revolution, begun with you and I, of how to stop melting the polar ice cap out of our irresponsible use of fuel driven by greed and markets, the pursuit of ultimate power as a means of security. So instead of melting the polar ice cap, we need to obtain the wisdom to melt the human heart. And that has always been the admonition of the wise in all of the spiritual traditions since time immemorial, that regardless of political circumstances and moment in history, each individual has a duty to have the deeper conversation with the luminosity of their soul, with that which is that which is sustaining the heart, sustaining our vision, our hearing, our touch, our capacity to be aware and to know ourselves. And that duty is what's being neglected by those who are trying to govern us. They are not governing themselves. So how can they possibly govern us? I was, unlike you, I was a child development major, and I,
I love it.
I learned that so much of the worldview of people is determined by their first couple of years on the planet and how they're treated, and that uh, and that it's very difficult for people to overcome those early imprints. Nevertheless,
Yes.
there are principles. There are principles that apply to the pursuit of peace for the individual, as well as to the pursuit of peace within and amongst families, communities, and nations.
So I want
And
to
those
pause.
principles have been forgotten.
I want to pause you there, and I want to dive in with this. We're going to take this as its own section here. I want to dive into this. So you say we need a deeper conversation with the luminosity of our soul. And there's some key principles that apply. And since we were talking about nuclear weapons, and I'm guessing I've read surveys in the past that if we look at how many people worldwide, and certainly how many people in this country want this, the overwhelming majority do not. We are a peace-loving people on some level, but we are doing the work. I'm going to put it in quotes because I know the danger of playing with these words. We are doing the work out there. But there is a shift that we need to do in here that will then reflect in our outer circumstances. What are these principles?
Well, first of all, the vast majority of people have never had very much of an influence on the geopolitics of the nation state.
Right.
The security of the state's always been done by elites, and people are gamed on that, and that love of home and love of tribe and self and religion and race, etc., are always invoked by the state when it exercises the use of force. And the state, of course, has a monopoly on violence. That's the whole idea of the state. But that doesn't have anything to do with the individual's duty to come to terms with honoring the power that gives us this moment of life. And it turns out that the very same principles that allow us to penetrate deep within ourselves are the same principles that when applied, lead us to live together in harmony with our families, our communities, and nations. So let's try a couple of those principles.
Love it.
All of those people who've who've experienced the profound wonder of the unity of the web of life, and literally come back saying it's one, whether it's Mohammed or the great Greek philosophers or Jesus or Moses, all of them articulate some aspect of the golden rule as a way of living amongst each other and with each other. Now, just take this as a simple thought experiment
All right.
with the brothers and sisters listening. Now, just imagine tomorrow that you live completely rejecting the principles of the Golden Rule, and you treat everybody as a means to your most selfish, inconsiderate ends. That you love things and use people, that you have no sense of restraint or patience or caring for them. Now imagine going to bed and how you would feel all by yourself in bed that night, because I assure you, you'll be all by yourself.
Oh, you put some weapons under the pillow.
Yeah, you would probably have to. Right. Good point. Very good point. Now imagine the next day treating everybody with as much love as you treat the most intimate persons in your life, that you treat everyone as part of your family and as part of the breathing along with you, and that you care for them as much as you possibly can and express the most beautiful qualities that you have and try to bring out those same beautiful qualities in them. And then imagine how you feel when you put your head on the pillow, your sense of peace and satisfaction. Now extrapolate that for the entirety of your life. And you can see that if you want to have a life of meaning and peace and fulfillment, the application of caring for others as one cares for oneself brings a state of fulfillment, clear conscience, and peace. So the principle for that would be separate from that the great Sufi master who taught me, Bawa Muhayyiddin, often said, separate from yourself that which separates you from others. Because the same qualities that separate us from others, anger, falsehood, jealousy, pride, miserliness, arrogance, those are the exact same qualities that separate us from the deeper parts of ourselves. And the qualities that bring us together, love, compassion, patience, tolerance, they diminish the ego, they diminish the illusion of separation, they open the heart, which is the doorway to the luminosity of the soul, and affirm the intrinsic unity that is the reality of creation. Now, when nations violate these principles, the chaos and instability ensues. Here's an example. After World War I, and I needn't go into the accident of the beginning of World War I, which was totally based on arrogance and illusion, but after World War I,
I've got to ask there because I can hear the voices behind me. The 10-second version of what happened, the accident that started World War I.
The accident was a 19-year-old went to kill a prince in Serbia. Yeah. He missed his opportunity and he gave up, and he was going to have a smoke by a delicatessen by a bridge. There was a traffic jam, and the prince that he wanted to shoot ended up in front of him, and he shot him. The rulers of most of Europe at the time were interrelated, and they were writing letters, like, it won't be a problem, we'll be over in a few weeks. Yeah, it's not quite what happened. The logic of the survival of the state and the projection of honor and power of the state ended up in the massive slaughter that brought us World War I and World War II, I might add, because World War I was terminated under terms that ensured World War II. And those terms were the imposition of pain on the Germany and the countries that lost. Tremendous reparations that caused impoverishment and dishonor. So Germany wanted to pay back this, and we reaped the whirlwind of Nazism. But after World War II, the United States led with generals who saw the cost of war and created the Marshall Plan. So instead of crushing the vanquished, we generously built their economies, built robust democracies in Germany and Japan, ended up with friends and trading partners. And from that, of course, the international UN system, which has brought many countries into democracy, advanced human rights, created a global economy that's brought hundreds of millions of people out of poverty, and set forth certain principles that are very, very positive and civilizing. So we've seen when the application of these principles are put into practice at any level, they bring benefit. But the question for the kind of people that listen to people like you and I is, what's our responsibility here? What's my responsibility if I'm a school teacher or a nurse or a musician or just hanging out or a person pursuing wealth and power? What's my personal responsibility? What can I do? That's the kind of questions that people listening, are. They're not mostly people exercising state power. Um, and so I think that you attract such people because you, Michael, have gone deep into yourself and found something that transcends the karmic or historical circumstance of yourself, that is universal to the audience, that everybody can relate to. So, what have you found that is the greatest treasure that you want the audience that are listening to us now, that they could find within themselves?
The one greatest treasure. See, I speak one way, but I view the world another. I view the world as such an interconnected web that there is no separation between anyone and anything. And I don't, when I talk politics, and the reason I don't talk about it on the show is because I truly believe the answer comes from doing the work within ourselves. And that shifts everything. Paul Selig, a dear friend who we've had on the show many times, who's an amazing channel, he talks about us raising to a higher octave or going to a higher room. That's where the answers are found to me. And so when we talk about, it's interesting, when you talk about treating the golden rule, and it is how I have a rescued vole on the other side of the room in a giant aquarium that we're going to put him in this week, because we rescued this little creature on the path, on the trail, on a 19-mile run last week, and he had crawled out of a hole, unable to see, 5 or 6 days old, lost his mom, no food. And we're 5 miles from home, and we've got to climb over fallen trees and several avalanche fields. And I grab the vole, and I go into a place of prayer, and I find a way to limp him out of there. It's all interconnected. It's all one. But there is a fear within us that has been indoctrinated in us, that if we open our hearts and treat everybody the way that we wish to be treated, we will be stomped all over. I think it's something that's been taught to us early on, because kids don't act this way. But like Jessica's parents told her, or her dad specifically, even for girls, don't cry, that's a sign of being weak. And this idea of protecting ourselves is an arms control race of arms control races.
Now, I think I agree with almost everything that you've said. Implicit in this was that by pursuing inner realization, we change the world.
Yes.
No, no. One pursues inner realization independently of all circumstances.
Well, not to change the world, yes.
And that the metrics of even looking at that and subjecting it to those metrics would have caused Socrates not to have drank the hemlock and advanced the rule of law. It would have caused Jesus a way of getting out of being crucified and not having his disciples violate their trust by the time the cock crowed, and so forth. That the activity of the relationship with the power of infinite love that creates us is sovereign, and that everything else is relative. And the goal of the other activities is to ensure an enabling environment for human beings to pursue their connection with the source of unconditional love.
I want to pause you there, because that's
never
huge.
The other way around. Never the other way around.
What you just described flips the entire world on its head, as it should be. That this, I'm going to call it, no other way to put it in this discussion, the outer world. Well, it's sort of like the concept of yoga, which has gotten a little bit confused here. Yoga asanas are to prepare ourselves for the work. That's not the work.
Thank you. Yes, that's correct. Yes, that's really important, um, because the why is very important. Without the clarity of the why, the how occludes the why. And the how itself, being so attractive and so engaging, becomes an end in itself. And this is what we're seeing in modernity, since we don't have what philosophers would call teleology, or purpose. Science doesn't give us purpose. It just describes things. So we have a financial system disconnected from the production of goods and services, where you just look, the how of the how of our economy is capital. That's not the why. The why is to provide goods and services for people, and freedom for moral agency, so that you have capital and you can be free. The why of medicine is healing, not eliminating symptoms and taking a fee. The why of philosophy is to use the intellect to pursue truth and develop wisdom. The modern philosophy is almost entirely a critique and analysis of the methodology of philosophy. The why of art is to uplift the human spirit and open up creativity and wonder. But most modern art it's just incomprehensible, because it's all about the methodology of art. And religion, which is the why, is a loving kindness and compassion and transcendence of the limitations of space and time, and the realization of the immortality of the soul, has now become degraded into rites, rituals, dogmas, and ultimately even political doctrine. Mm-hmm. And so that the various hows have become ends in themselves. And the solution to that, of course, is with our individual lives, that we need human beings who are themselves the example of being human beings. That the purpose of being the why of being a human being is to discover the core of being itself, which is contained within us, the pure being which is contained within us, and to make that manifest. And that's so compelling that if you just get one taste of that, mm-hmm. it changes everything for that person.
So let's talk then. We're going to go from whys to hows. How do we become? Because unless one has that experience, that divine intervention, in my case with multiple 2x4s.
What? What do you mean multiple? What do you mean by that?
I mean, I got spirit knocked me good several times.
You didn't get it the first time?
Well, it's interesting. Ego came in the back door, Jonathan. I really got it the first time, but then I had to do because of what I had learned, which means I was forgetting what I had learned.
Oh.
And then going right back into things.
Well, how did you learn this, and what did you learn?
So, well, the first, what I describe as a near-death experience, taught me we are all one. There is no way you can separate that. I cannot look at you any differently. I just want to give you the biggest hug, Jonathan, and I want to give everybody the biggest hug, and you can't convince me otherwise, because it's all.
You mean I'm not special?
Jonathan, you are incredibly special. You are my brother, Jonathan.
I'm teasing.
But you get it.
Yes, of course, because the hug that comes from God within us is like sunshine. It's wherever we look, we want to see the deepest meaning and treasure of that, absolutely. Which is the eyes of whomever you are with, whenever you are with them. Yes. Because everybody's vision who's looking at you is miraculous.
Yes.
But you don't get how miraculous others are until you start investigating your own vision. What is it inside of us that sees? Find it. What is it inside of us that touches? I mean, if we cut open Jonathan's hand, are we going to see anything that touches? You're just going to see bones and skin and whatnot. Is that what touches? If we take out my eyeball, and are we going to see the thing that sees? No. It's very, very wondrous. And when you realize how wondrous your vision, your touch, your own consciousness is, and then you look at another human being and you go, oh my goodness, this thing alive in them is far more precious and valuable than a $10 million diamond that might be sitting there, or that house or that car. That person's life is so valuable and precious. And then, of course, the great wisest amongst us said, if you want to figure out how to be at peace and have policies that work, they said, look at what Matthew, quotes Jesus as saying. I was hungry. Did you feed me? I was naked. Did you clothe me? I was in prison. Did you visit me? Etc. And then the disciples all go, well, wait a minute. We never saw you in prison. We never saw you naked. We didn't. What are you talking about? And he said, no. What you do to the least amongst you, you're doing to me. You're doing to me, to the God-realized being. And Gandhi said, if you want to analyze an appropriate policy, imagine the perspective of the least enfranchised person, the poorest person. But what they're saying is that this great treasure of the gift of life and consciousness exists in every life. And that if we want to be fulfilled personally, we have to have that attitude. Now, for me, I bring that into action because I'm a lawyer, so I want to deal with treaties and things that the way states operate. But every human being, I think, has an opportunity at some time to engage in these big issues. We're all in this together. But what I want to know is, you had this profound experience.
Yes.
And then, how could you possibly have forgotten it? And then what did God or the universe do to make you remember?
It's not that I forgot. How do I put this? I went from beingness, from, we'll call it ultimate love and compassion for myself as well as for others, to my ego getting in and say, you need to get busy, Michael. You need to start teaching. You need to do this. You need to do that. Push, 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 strive, strive, drive. I felt I have given a gift of another opportunity to be here. And if I am to be, this is where I lost it, worthy and worthy of that gift.
Oh, wow. Wow. Praise and blame. Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah.
Bingo. Then I must do. And I pushed myself so hard that after a series of books came out, I've got my second book, I'm out on the road, I am given all these beautiful signs and symbols that I am not supposed to be here. And it was as if the largest banner is flown up in the sky behind the largest airplane saying, dude, what are you doing? Right? RV breaks down repeatedly, broken into, tips on a half onto its side, and on and on and on and on it goes.
So
broken transmission.
So the universe you started seeing that you were on the wrong path. But
Yes.
what was it that you've now realized? What was it that occluded the clarity of that original vision? Where was the wrong turn that you had to then come back onto the main road?
There was wiring that was still there after, and it was a trifecta of 3 accidents. There was wiring still in there that said, if you do not do, then you are not. That if you are not creating, producing, teaching, and I love what I'm doing, and I'm on an absolute mission, but it's different. I'm in a complete place. I hope I'm in a complete place of surrender, and I want to surrender to an even deeper level, and I want to surrender even deeper than that. And I want to keep surrendering and surrendering. But at that time, I was not listening to my deepest inner wisdom. I was instead listening to messages of fear, of being less than. It's interesting. I didn't have a fear of death. I don't have a fear of death anymore. I have a fear of loss, losing my wife, even though that is a chosen attachment. And I do realize that it is a choice I make in this lifetime. It does make it easier on some level, particularly for relationships. But I was convinced that I needed to push. If there was a lapse of memory, it is what I teach people now, a concept I call cherry picking. And cherry picking, Jonathan, is to say, you are God. You are the divine. This is the divine. This experience over here is the divine. But that over there, no, that's not God. That's not universe. That's something completely different. When it all is. And I forgot that. And so I thought I had to push, or I wasn't doing what I needed to do. Fear.
Well, I would say that it wasn't the pushing was the issue, and that everything isn't the same. I mean, chocolate and shit are quite different. We need to have discernment. Selfishness and generosity are quite different. But it was the attachment to outcome. It was the sense that you had to achieve, rather than seeing service as and giving of yourself, which is called sacrifice, which the root of which is sacred, is a way not of burdening but liberation. That this is the big turn, between the thought of a spiritual path and actually being on it, when you realize that by giving of yourself for others, you get free of a burden and get into a space where you can be expressing love. I'm blessed with being a wonderful companion. I'm married 42 years now.
Yeah.
And it works because we both understand that giving of ourselves to the other is an opportunity to get free of the illusion of separation.
Yeah.
And I view the privilege of being a activist for world peace as a means of freeing myself from petty egocentricity. And if I perceive this as a way of succeeding in a way that I determine how it is, I mean, then I'll be taking the praise for success, and then taking the blame and shame for failure. Well, on the issue that I've taken on, imagine the arrogance if I said, "Oh my God, I'm saving the world." How preposterous and arrogant that would be. And the fact that presently the nuclear weapon states are engaging in a new arms race, increasing the dangers of nuclear annihilation, violating the norms of reason and law and morality.
Yeah, Jonathan, what are you up to? This is what are you doing wrong here?
What do you do? Just a sense of failure. I mean, it would be so crushing. I mean, I've had business people, who've helped fund the work that I've been doing say, "Well, what have you done? What have you accomplished lately?" And I think, well, I can't say, I don't know. It's way beyond that. It's the pursuit of truth and virtue has to stand on its own. And part of it is, if you're going to do that, you can't do it from the ego mind. It has to be done as a sacred endeavor, as a dedication, as a prayer, as an offering. Otherwise, it takes you back to the striving of the ego, just with another set of metrics and another set of activities, which is a new bondage.
And that's exactly where I went.
And it's even worse because now you've got the idea, oh my gosh, I'm doing virtue. And now
you're in the virtue business.
You're in the virtue business, but now you've got the bondage of the arrogance of spirituality as a new bondage.
Yep.
So if you use spirituality as a form of ego enhancement, as a new form of anxiety, I've got to do my asanas. I've got to do my prayer beads. I've got to do my 5 times prayer. I've got to hurry up. I better get to my meditation. Um, if you're, or I'm better than you because I'm doing this and you're not, I'm spiritual and you're not, any of those things, then what tool will you have to get free? You've taken the tool to diminish the ego, the tool of learning humility, the tool of learning to get on your knees, the tool of learning the privilege of giving away to others, and turned it into a new bondage. Very difficult to get out of. So you fell into that. How did you get out of it?
It was a two-step dance.
Wow.
So step number one was being broken again.
Oh,
And that's,
expensive, isn't it, Michael?
what's that?
It's expensive.
Well, it was expensive. It was miraculous in how the expenses were covered, but I think it was like, I don't want to exaggerate here, but might have been like $50,000 for the helicopter flight alone.
What happened that and how did you get it? How did you get it?
Well,
How did you get the lesson? Because it wasn't just the happening, something clicked that really was a blessing.
it was a two-part. So the first part was um, slip and fall outside of Lake Tahoe, exploding my other leg the exact same way the first leg had been exploded 7 years before. And finding myself in a creek bed, stopped breathing, whole world goes to a tunnel and have a choice. And what am I going to do? And I had just told my wife how much I loved her and how much I wanted to have kids. And it was a chosen attachment to her and an honor to serve her. And she is screaming, and I can hear her screaming, "What do I do?" And so was not checking out, conscious breathing for the next hour. What can I do? Breathe in light up from up above, send out love, light, love, light, love. No blood pressure when the EMTs get there, but I still made it through. That was another taste, and it definitely softened me. I spent weeks laying on a couch after they tried to get me moving, and my red blood cell count collapsed. I had had 5 other people's blood in me, but it wasn't enough for me to get moving yet. And I said, no, no, the body doesn't want to move. And they're like, well, we need to get you moving. I'm like, please don't. We need to get you moving. And the blood values crashed through the floor. So after I got out, I laid on an angel's couch in the middle of her house, somebody we'd never even met before, who kept us there for weeks where I couldn't even lift my head off of the pillow to get the strength to get on an airplane to get home. I got home. I was softer, but I felt there was still work that I needed to get done. And I can remember on the last day of the work, I'm riding my bicycle. We were making a mindfulness and a running program. It's a beautiful program. And I'm on the bicycle. It's almost a year later. I'm healing. I'm still limping, but I'm getting better. And we have like one last video to finish. It's so perfectly appropriate how it happened. And I was a former professional cyclist. I raced in Europe. I race in the Alps. The bike is like my safety zone. No harm can come on the bike. And I round the last bend on the side of the Haleakala volcano on Maui, because we lived on the side of the volcano in our house. And my front wheel, I watched it just lifted into the air. And I don't even know how it lifted into the air. Didn't slide out, went up. And it was slow motion, up, up, up. And then the fastest, boom, down. And head hit the pavement with helmet on. Bicycle jackknifed to where the handlebars managed to dent in the side of the bicycle. I hit that hard. And I broke all of my ribs in front of my heart. I broke all of the ribs behind my heart. I broke my scapula, my clavicle, everything around that holds your heart in place.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I was also knocked out of my mind. I had a great concussion going on. And that did it. I got it. I got it. I got it. I got it. Jessica would say it saved our marriage. It put me in a place of, as you said, privilege, and the word that I bring to it is honored. I'm honored to do the work I do now. When I'm stuck up late at night, my ego will go, "Oh my God," and then I'll laugh and go, "I am still honored. I'm so honored to be doing this." And I went to a place of profound service from me, me, no death of the ego to me, but me the hell out of the way to, it's where we teach now a program called automatic writing, diving in and hearing that inner wisdom. I don't, uh, I don't drive anymore, Jonathan. I drive a car. I have a fun car, but I don't drive anymore. And I've gotten way out of that way. The show, the everything that's taken place is all by getting out of the way and of, I call it being an open-hearted warrior, of stepping forward heart first now, rather than that egoic driving, striving aspect.
So it was very expensive to get to this place that you went to. Uh, we wouldn't ask other people to pay that price,
It's not
but
necessary.
well, I don't know. I don't know anyone who has gotten there without paying a high price.
Yeah.
But everyone who's gotten there comes back with pretty much the same message, which is no, you don't have to pay the price to get there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it seems that you do. But even if you just take what you learned a little bit, what you're sharing about this getting out of the way, this getting out of the way is not that easy because oftentimes the thing that thinks it's getting out of the way is the very thing that's in the way. Sort of like uh, the the thief dressing up as the policeman,
Yes.
right? And that's why grace and falling in love is so important. You know that. I mean, I think it's really true when the fundamentalist Christians say you need the help of Jesus to do this. But Jesus says that he's the truth, the light, and the way. He never says that he's the body of this historical figure. The light is described in every culture by the wise. This infinite light that illumines the souls of all beings. This infinite light is the truth. And coming in contact with that is the way. Mm-hmm. To singularize it into a historical moment is not the truth, the light, and the way. This is a aspect of the mind, not the light that illuminates the cosmos and creation. And in every system of society, there's always these wise people who have this message about the importance of becoming free of selfishness, pettiness, and falling in love with the inner spirit. And how that happens is there's no there. You mean people make systems, but I've yet to meet anybody who discovered it within the system. You may need the system to describe it, as in we need grammar to use language. Mm-hmm. But the grammar of our language has subject, object, predicate. It has duality. It has multiplicity. But that which we're describing in this conversation is the oneness of things, incompatible with the grammar of I doing something to it. Right? But we need to describe in these systems. And yet, as the Tao Te Ching, the great Taoist book, which is like the Bible for Taoists, begins, The way that can be described is not the way. And in Judaism, in a period of time, people were not even allowed to write the name of God because they didn't want it to be a noun. And Muhammad describes this wonder as simply compassion and mercy. Compassion was enough, one of the attributes. It's truly beyond the limits of our descriptive capacity, and yet it's important to talk about it and describe it. Even though it's beyond our methods, it's important to use a method.
So, I like what you just said. While it's beyond methods, where do people go from here?
Well, sometimes you need a piece of wood to get a splinter out. So we need methods within relativity to get us to the absolute. And one of the very, I lived with somebody. I've had a lot of really great teachers. I mean, uh, uh, Senator Alan Cranston, who was my political mentor, taught me three things. One is when you look at the condition of the world, you have a choice of humor or terror. Go toward humor. He said,
Thank you.
he said, don't ever sweat the small stuff.
Mhm.
And three, nuclear weapons are unworthy of civilization.
Amen.
I had a great teacher, a great Sufi master, Bawa Muhayyiddin, who was beyond, he was also, the Hindus called him Babaji, or the ancient one, and Guru Bawa. But he was found in the jungles of Sri Lanka. And what he taught was the following principles. God is love.
Yeah.
There is nothing other than God.
Yeah.
And that every breath can be a vehicle for the remembrance of the one that is actually breathing, knowing, and existing through us, which is inseparable from that which is living through all and everything, everywhere, at all times, without form, without beginning or end. And one of the tools that he encouraged, which so many spiritual masters encourage, is coming to awareness of the miracle of breathing. That breathing is such a great vehicle of remembrance because if you reflect on it, you're not doing it. You're being breathed.
Yes.
Just like your heart. Uh, I love your description of everything around your heart that broke, but I like the description implicit in that was that your heart actually broke. The shell of Michael broke, and the luminosity of the divine appeared.
Woohoo!
So the practice of going deep into breathing, of making each breath a remembrance, a tool of the sacred, is a very powerful tool that everyone can do. So with the out breath, there's so many ways of doing it. One traditional way is the out breath is letting go of all negativity and letting go of the illusion of separation and remembering there's nothing other than God.
Yes.
And with the in breath, that is God. That which is God. Thou art God. There is only God. But God is a word, and it's a difficult word. So let's just start with one of the attributes. You could take peace or love or patience. Let's just take gratitude. Let's do gratitude. So with the out breath, one expresses a sense of relief and letting go. And with the in breath, an affirmation of gratitude for this breath and this moment of life. And with the out breath, a letting go. And you let go of all the tensions in the body, tensions of the forehead and the face and the shoulders and the stomach and the arms and the waist and the legs, the feet. Just letting go with this out breath. And with the in breath, allowing oneself to be filled with the gratitude of this breath of life, that life flowing through our being with our vision, our hearing, our taste, our touch, and the very energy and the oxygen flowing throughout all of the cells of our body, giving them life and vibrancy. And the out breath, just letting go of any negativity, any tension, any fear, any selfishness. And the in breath, gratitude and love of that which gives us this breath of life, love of this moment of life. And then going deep into the beginning of this next breath. Out breath, and then the in breath. Going deep into that which is watching it. Not just what we're watching, but letting go of the attachment to that which we're seeing. And then the in-breath, that love, looking at it with love, looking at each thing that comes before your consciousness with a loving attitude and an attitude of gratitude. Just going deep into the silence within that. The out-breath is not I, because you're not breathing, and the in-breath is only you, oh God, you're giving me this breath. You are this breath. You are everything. Not I, only thou. And then allowing the grace within this presence to heal us, to bless us, to cause us to be more attracted to the source that's giving life to all who are with us at this moment. All living beings, all being sustained by the same gift of the breath that each of us is being gifted with. All being blessed together. May this blessing be with us and cause us to remember the preciousness of every child that's born, every mother that has given birth, every father that wants to protect their precious children, every old person preparing for the next phase, every person who's working so hard to give meaning to their lives, every person who's forgotten their meaning, every other person being blessed with life itself, every creature that's blessed with this blessing of life, every bird, every insect, every animal, every mammal, every fish, all of them on this small planet existing in infinity, the reality of infinity of space and time existing in this. But this breath, and this breath, a gift to you and I, allowing us to come back to this very powerful door to this mystery, this door of gratitude and love. May this gift of gratitude and love, which opens the door to so many blessings, fill us and bless us and keep us uh, to honor this gift with the service of our lives. Amen.
Amen. Woohoo. Can you imagine if we all were to take the time to walk around this way?
No, couldn't imagine it, but it's worth experimenting with. I was on a subway car recently in New York, and I just was thinking really deeply, really deeply. I just got into this space where I was remembering a few years earlier, everyone in the subway car was this beautiful little infant, and I was just really in that space, and it was so interesting. People started smiling at me, this actually happened. And so I was it was good too. I was on the A train. and exactly. And I was all of a sudden in this sacred space in the subway. Um, that happened. I don't know if it'll happen again. I can't, probably won't happen if I expect it. But it was really good for me to just remember that Donald Trump was a beautiful infant once, as well as Saint Francis and you and I, and that soon we're going to be doddering people on our way out, and that what we do in between is in our hands. It's so um, and for me, I can't imagine not wanting to bring the best of these qualities into our daily lives. Why not? Why not just try it? And then try bringing it into the very breath of the moment. Just try it. Try it 5 minutes in the morning and a little bit in the evening. And then what happens is you just like getting close to God all the time. Because as the prophet said, if we take one step toward that, it takes 10 steps toward us.
And that, my friend, changes everything. Everything. This has been so beautiful, Jonathan. I have enjoyed having you on the show so, 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 so much. I'm in this beautiful, blissful place. I gotta bring it back up so people can even hear my voice now.
Michael, I'm like behind you. If you go, if you just move a little bit, everyone can see me behind you. Oh.
For those, I have a green screen magic here, and I wanted to bring in. You have such a joyous energy. So you and I both see the child, the infant, and everybody. I don't know how not to. And Jessica says I have to be careful what I say because of that. Because anybody, I can see the sweetness and the divine within them. And she's like, careful how you say that.
You have to be careful. You have to be careful. Ecstatics like you have to be careful. Look, I'm a lawyer, so I'm pretty serious. You can see how serious I am. But you, Michael, you're just shining all over the place. So you have to be careful.
but so the image behind us is like, it's not 2 times Jonathan, it's exponential. This is like having Jonathan squared on the show.
I'll come on your show anytime, brother. I mean, you're just an amazing witness, and people don't know. They don't know what I know about you. That I met you in Aspen, and I could see right away that you had turned your body into a tool of service. That I actually saw this. That it was like completely a broken down palace, and then you just built it up so that people could visit. And this is a very intentional endeavor, and it was not an easy endeavor. But that at one point you did it like for selfishness. You built up to be a great athlete, and then you built it up so you could help other people. Did the same thing, and on the outside it might have looked the same, but it was completely a different being doing it. And the third time you did it was totally as an act of devotion, which is just such a powerful testimony. And I honor this profoundly, and will be more than happy to serve with you in any time you ask.
It so goes both ways. I don't know what to say about everything you just said, but I would be honored. I would be honored. I would be honored, Jonathan.
Thank you, brother.
Thank
It's a good
you, brother.
show.
No, last question. Is there anywhere you want to send, second to last question, is there anywhere you want to send people today?
Back to themselves. I mean, really. I mean, yeah. I mean, that's your point, and I mean, I think that's really important. I mean, you mean like websites and stuff?
Yeah, but I think you just gave the ultimate URL of them all.
Yeah, yeah. that's that's what's important. They can find out. They can find me or you on the internet, but there's too much of that. Let's remind ourselves to go back to ourselves. That's what's more important right now, I think.
And I was going to ask any last words of wisdoms, but maybe you just answered it. Thank you. Silence. The silence is a good thing here. So, for everyone, got to crank it up for the finish here. For everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, dive into the inner work, we'll put that in quotes, and begin discovering inner and outer peace today. And shine bright.
Woohoo!
Oh my God, my brother. I love you. I love this. I love what you're doing. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
This was a wonderful thing. So, what happens? This is going to go out to people, or just? I don't know. I just did this to talk with you. Honestly.
I just had the most beautiful, open-hearted conversation with Jonathan Granoff on inner and outer peace. To find out more on peace, click here, subscribe below.